Humans have a tendency to fear that which we do not understand, and technology has always caused suspicion in the eyes of those who are first to use it. Artificial intelligence is far beyond anything we've had to ponder philosophically, but it is far from the first fear we've had to contend with. Decades ago, when virtual reality was in its infancy, there were those who thought that people would spend their lives immersed in a synthetic world all day. Well, come to think of it, it's not too far off from where we are now with our phones. But let us go back further. In 1825, when the first public trains were being promoted, there was a fear among the public that traveling faster than 30 or 40 miles an hour might tear the body apart, the force being too great to survive, or at the very least damage the internal organs. This seems preposterous to us now, but at the time nobody had traveled that fast before, so how are they to know? Fortunately, they were wrong, and we travel much faster than that today. Perhaps not always to our benefit. Inventions relating to communications were always suspect. When the telegraph was invented, there were some that thought it could cause the whole of society to begin communicating in snippets, and that it would destroy language and culture. I suppose one could compare it to the emoji, or shortened words of today. But the point is, the underlying language is still used in most situations. We just have shorthand when we need it. If we travel forward a bit further, the telephone made its debut in the late 1800s, among concerned that the use of this device would make people antisocial. Now there are plenty of antisocial people out there, but rather than the phone making them so, it was a tool for those who were already distant from others. A tool that could help them connect rather than disconnect, for lack of a better term. The fears were unfounded for the most part. Some even feared the lines could be used to communicate with the dead. Swedish preachers said that it was an instrument of the devil, and many phone lines were cut or sabotaged out of those fears. Kind of silly? Maybe. What about radio? Sure enough, some people thought that the radio waves were going to harm us as they passed through our bodies, as well as the usual fears of people being disconnected, withdrawing from life and the like. Once again, in time we realized it was just another tool that could be used to improve how we share information. When television came around, the whole story unfolded again, only this time it came along with some concerns over the spiritual nature of how moving pictures may somehow compromise the soul of the person, just as colonists found when they tried to photograph indigenous tribes when they discovered them. In these cases, the people panicked, thinking that by taking a picture you were draining them of their souls somehow. And when you think about it, can you blame them? That's some spooky stuff to a tribe without any technology at all. Of course, there was also the fear that TV would harm your eyes, which, while not generally true, it did have some merit after GE sent out several faulty TV sets in the 1980s that it turned out they emitted X-rays. The problem was abated, but the mythology lived on to the present day. We have to ask, are all these fears really unfounded? When you consider it, we're still unsure about how our technology affects us. Sometimes the fear is not one of health, but one of lost profit. A couple more mundane examples would be cassettes and VHS tapes. When blank tapes came into the market, there was a huge backlash over fears that allowing people to record music and video at home would destroy the movie and music industries. It was the Napster of its day, and Hollywood and the record labels fought back hard against them. But the tapes prevailed, and music and movies continued to flourish. We could record our own, but most people still bought the album or movie. In the end, it was not the media that was destroyed, but the capitalist companies that preyed upon the musicians and actors that had to adjust their way of doing business, or get left behind. Today this is still true, even more so, as technology moves forward too fast. Some fears have legitimate reasoning. After Oppenheimer created the first atomic bomb, he famously was quoted as the following from an ancient Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." He turned to Hinduism after witnessing the famous Trinity test, where the U.S. detonated its first nuclear weapon. As a philosopher, the religion helped him make sense of what he'd witnessed and created. I mention this because of all our past creations, inventions, and discoveries, perhaps none are as double-sided as the potential for nuclear power, balanced with the potential for nuclear annihilation. It is the epitome of creation or destruction, as any tool can be misused. And perhaps that is the point. Every invention of mankind has the potential to better life or to strip it of meaning. Media and television are neutral until one chooses what to watch or who to listen to. One may be immersed in a documentary of education, or they may be mindlessly watching reality television for distraction from real life. For the most part, we do not fear the technology itself. We fear what we might do with it. Which brings us to the latest situation. Now we fear what it may do with us. In the past, an invention was only as useful as what we did with it. If there were no phone lines, people had no phones. If there was no television, they didn't watch TV. And even with the bomb, if we're not building or detonating them, we were unlikely to suffer nuclear annihilation. And if we stopped building power plants, we had no new fuel rods to store. But all that changed with the technology revolution. No area of the world is out of reach from the internet now, and things are moving much quicker than we can process our discoveries. Amidst this revolution, artificial intelligence has become the new face of suspicion, because AI might not sit dormant until used, or ask before it makes changes to the systems we all rely on. We are so interconnected that we rely heavily on software that we know is programmed by fallible humans. The smallest changes or errors in a system can devastate an economy in a matter of hours. Still worse, we are overly reliant on the power grids and GPS to the point that without them, commerce would halt. So this fear of an artificial mind making decisions for us is reasonable and expected. In the age of self-driving cars and swarms of robot drones the size of flies, we have to reason to be suspect of how this might turn out. It's not unreasonable to have strong reservations about something that is so pervasive and affects us all on a daily basis. Not just that, but this technology is built on the shoulders of others, and we have to remember that we should all have a say in how it's implemented, especially when we don't know how it will turn out. We can choose not to take the train, and therefore not have to worry about whether our bodies collapse at 30 miles an hour. We can choose not to talk on the phone, or watch television. We can choose not to do a lot of things, but some of them are forced upon us. And this is when people have a right to a question, and even to protest. Just as one cannot opt out of the nuclear fallout, we cannot opt out of technology. Not only does the system require us to use banks, cards, applications, and bureaucracy, but even if we can leave the city and live in the woods, we're governed by progress and eminent domain when others want to use our land for their needs. We are locked into a certain way of life. The scariest part about that is the potential for one system to fail and cause a ripple effect. The monoculture of humanity. The hopes and dreams of billionaires who want to fly to Mars are only possible with the inventions of a society that is far ahead of its own ability to handle what it creates. We have our heads in the clouds because handling the problems we have here at home are far less glamorous than building rockets, and perhaps that is the reason and the lesson we need to learn. Technology is not what we fear. Rather, it is human nature and our inability to use our tools properly. Our hubris and arrogance, our desire for fame and recognition, and our lack of ability to see through another person's eyes, all contribute to blindness to what is really important. And I do not fault us for this as a species. After all, we never had a choice as to what future we wanted until very recently. By the time we had the technology to live in a utopia, we had already found ourselves in a hall of mirrors, our own dreams and desires looking back at us with no idea how we got there. I am still not sure if we know where we want to be. Perhaps this is the human condition. But what are the positive sides of these pretty lights and buttons? Maybe the real fear of technology should be reserved for those few who have abused the rest of society for so long, those who have wronged their fellow man or robbed the lands out of greed. Perhaps this age of awareness can shine a light on the true problems that we face and allow us to see reality through a similar lens now that we have the ability to communicate so freely and easily. Maybe AI will turn out to be literal godsend, solving the issues that we are not even aware that we have yet. Maybe we will look back on ourselves with the same chuckle as we have for those who thought telephones would communicate with the devil or planes could never fly. Maybe. But there are a lot of maybes in life, and in this case, I think things are different. We are at a crossroads where we are implementing systems we are unsure how to operate. I'm not sure what to make of it all, but it sure is an interesting time to be alive. We will see what the future holds, if we're lucky enough to make it without destroying ourselves. It is possible. Anything is possible. Be well.